On this Tuesday night, new urgency about the spread of COVID-19.
We're at a bit of a crossroads.
Canada's top doctor on how to avoid another lockdown. A Canadian woman accused of trying to poison the U.S. president appears in court. The letters, the tweets, and the alleged threats. And bracing for Hurricane Teddy.
The parking lot here will likely be underwater.
The menacing storm barreling toward Atlantic Canada.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is no way to sugarcoat the trajectory this country is on when it comes to COVID-19. Cases are going up. They're accelerating fast in some regions, especially in people aged 20 to 39. And if you're tired of hearing it from people like me and from public health officers and political leaders, just look at the numbers. This is the graph from the newest federal projections. If we keep doing what we're doing now, case numbers will skyrocket in the coming weeks and months. If we increase contact with other people more than we're doing now, the virus will spread even faster. But if we step up precautions and decrease who we come into contact with, public health officials believe we can get COVID cases back to a slow burn. Here are today's daily case numbers. These are people who became infected sometime in the past 2 weeks. The bulk of new cases are still in the 4 biggest provinces. Ontario is reporting 478 new cases today, the biggest jump since May. Quebec has almost 500 new cases. Out west, there are 150 new cases in Alberta and 96 in BC. Right now, Canada is at a crossroads in the fight against COVID-19. And if we don't act fast to slow the spread, public health experts warn we're headed down a dangerous path. David Akin has our top story tonight.
My message today is the time is now. We're at a bit of a crossroads.
A crossroads, Canada's top public health official says, a choice between continuing with schools and businesses reopening or a potential return to the lockdowns of the spring.
It's not surprising to have increasing cases in the fall. We've actually said this can happen. But now you gotta just keep things under control without the full lockdown.
Dr. Theresa Tam said this unsurprising new wave of infections, the second wave, is different from the first wave.
This surge is a very different surge to the previous wave. It is younger people. Right now we're seeing that the mortality is lower. The hospitalizations are lower.
But that could quickly change.
It's going to spill over into high-risk populations.
Hence, a call by Canada's health minister to show more self-restraint.
We have to get better at saying no more than yes to the invitations that we're receiving to gather for barbecues in the backyard or parties to celebrate occasions.
Another key difference this time, much higher testing capacity and more knowledge about tracing and breaking the transmission chain. Those factors may help smooth the transmission curve into some lower peaks and valleys.
We want to keep it at low moguls. We don't want it to go up a giant ski hill and down again.
And to keep the rate of transmission at what Tam called a slow burn, she said it's crucial Canadians do their part. Wash hands frequently, maintain physical distance, wear a mask when distancing is difficult, and stay home if experiencing any symptoms, even mild ones. And local public health authorities have to do their part too, with beefed up testing capacity, robust tracing, and resources to respond to outbreaks. As for the federal government, look to tomorrow's speech from the throne for commitments to families to give them the financial cushion they need to make the right health decisions, and commitments to provinces and local health authorities to give them the resources to beat the virus back. One final thing, Donna. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau plans to give a televised prime-time address tomorrow to underscore the urgency of dealing with this second wave.
David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. The family of Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, who has COVID-19, is dealing with another setback. His wife, Rebecca O'Toole, has now also tested positive. The Conservative Party says the couple's 2 children are being monitored for symptoms. The City of Ottawa is cracking down on rule breakers. A record 93 new cases of COVID-19 were reported there today, and the city's chief medical officer has ordered that anyone who has the virus, has been in contact with a positive case, or is waiting for a test result, will be fined up to $5,000 a day if they don't self-isolate for 14 days. And Ontario announced today what it says is the largest flu shot campaign in that province's history. It's investing $70 million to administer 5.1 million doses of flu vaccine to residents. It's part of a 6-pillar plan to prepare for a second wave. Health officials warn it could hit even harder than the first, though as Jeff Semple reports, the healthcare system this time appears much more prepared.
The first wave of COVID-19 last spring sent hospitals scrambling, building more capacity and canceling non-emergency surgeries. Fast forward 6 months, they're looking and sounding much more prepared for a potential second wave.
It's such a different scenario from March and April. We know about our PPE, our personal protective equipment. We've got lots of it. We have a stable supply. We communicate a lot with each other.
Canada's COVID-19 cases are climbing to levels not seen since early May.
How you define the second wave is up for grabs, but all the indications are that we should be very concerned with what's happening.
This Calgary hospital is suddenly scrambling to contain 2 COVID-19 outbreaks, which have killed at least 2 patients and infected around 20 others.
And those are still under investigation, so we're still trying to determine exactly how the introduction happened.
The good news for hospitals is that the vast majority of new COVID-19 cases are young adults in their 20s and 30s, few of whom require hospitalization. The potential bad news? What happens when the COVID-19 pandemic meets the flu season?
Certainly that's something that causes me to consume a lot of Tums worrying about that.
This Toronto area hospital, which just built this pandemic response unit, typically runs out of beds during a regular flu season.
We need to place a great deal of emphasis on making sure that we mitigate the effects of the flu season, that everyone gets their flu shot.
To that end, Ontario just announced its largest ever flu vaccine campaign, ordering more than 5 million doses.
But the next wave, it will come at us harder than the last one.
Quebec, which has already declared its second wave, is now urging healthcare workers, including dentists and midwives, to help with testing and contact tracing.
We have been working since last week to increase our screening capacity, but this is not enough.
Indeed, these long lineups at testing centers in different cities, a reminder that while we're better prepared, there's still a long way to go. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
England is trying to avoid another full lockdown as cases there rise. Coming up, the about-face from Prime Minister Boris Johnson as he addresses the nation tonight. First, some breaking news from the federal courthouse in Buffalo, New York. Pascale Ferrier, the Canadian woman charged with mailing a letter laced with a deadly toxin to the American president, has made her first court appearance. She pleaded not guilty. An FBI affidavit filed in court says when Ferrier was detained September 20th at the Peace Bridge border crossing, attempting to cross into the U.S., she told American border officers she was wanted by the FBI for the ricin letters. It says she was in possession of a loaded firearm in her belt as well as a knife. Abigail Beeman listened to the court proceedings today. Abigail, what happened?
Donna, the judge entered a not guilty plea on Pascale Ferrier's behalf. A French interpreter was used for the hearing, though Ferrier gave some one-word yes answers, and the judge acknowledged she has substantial knowledge of English. Ferrier's case was put over until next week. Court heard the U.S. intends to push back against bail, noting the charge involved a crime of violence and saying she posed a serious risk of flight. She was assigned a public defender.
She has a presumption of innocence, and that'll be pursued further after today.
Abigail, you read through the affidavit filed in court today. What does it reveal about her arrest and the allegations against her?
Well, Donna, the affidavit was written by an FBI special agent, and he alleges there were 7 letters in total, 1 sent to the president and 6 sent to Texas penitentiaries and detention centers. Let's look at the letter to Donald Trump first. It gives some clues about a possible motive. The author calls the president the ugly tyrant clown, saying he ruins the United States. It tells him to give up and remove your application for this election. The letter talks about a, quote, special gift for Trump and notes, if it doesn't work, I'll find better recipe for another poison, or I might use my gun when I'll be able to come. Enjoy, signed Free Rebel Spirit. The FBI confirmed the substance in the envelope was the poison ricin, and they found Pascale Ferrier by tracking people with Canadian connections who were arrested or spent time imprisoned in Texas. Ferrier had been arrested there for weapons possession last year. Court records show the charges were dismissed. She was released soon after and transferred into the custody of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. According to the FBI, the other 6 letters were sent to people affiliated with the facilities where she was held, and all the letters shared one line: "If it doesn't work, I will find a better recipe." There are still unanswered questions here, and a big one is about that so-called recipe. How did someone get their hands on ricin for 7 letters and not expose themselves to danger, considering just a pinhead amount can kill? Donna?
Abigail Beeman in Ottawa, thanks. So who is Pascale Ferrier and where has she spent the last few years? Mike Armstrong set out to find some answers by speaking to people who know her.
Diane Chamberlain says she knew the face immediately, but it took a minute to place. The woman suspected of sending ricin-laced letters lived at Chamberlain's campsite south of Montreal for the entire summer of 2018. Chamberlain says the more recent photos look very different. She doesn't have the same look in her eyes, Chamberlain says. It's like something changed. Pascal Ferrier appears to have kept 2 Facebook accounts. With them, you're able to piece together her life over the last several years. This was her citizenship ceremony in November of 2015. She immigrated to Canada from France. A year later, on a Twitter account under her name, there's a post that she seemed to be fed up with Quebec winters and was preparing to start a new life. Well, she purchased this RV in the fall of 2017 and started living in it full-time the next spring. Ferrier moved to a campsite northwest of Montreal, but according to the owner, left after just 1 month without paying. That's when she moved to Chamberlain's campsite, staying for the rest of the summer. She removed the table in the RV and replaced it with a desk running a web design company from it. Chamberlain says she worked out of the RV. She was quiet and they never had any trouble at all. Well, in October of 2018, she headed south for Texas, taking with her a travel companion. Everything seemed fine right through to a post on New Year's Eve. Now, there's nothing on her social media about her arrest March 12th, 2019 in southern Texas. She was picked up on firearm-related charges. Ferrier would spend time in jail. She was released in May and then headed back to Canada. She posted this video from a diner in Arkansas, updating friends, saying she was headed north. Well, back in Canada, she doesn't appear to have found a job in her field right away. She worked at this grocery store outside Montreal for 5 months. This woman says she was shocked to see her former colleague on the front page of newspapers. She says Ferrier never talked politics or said anything about having been arrested. Ferrier found a new job over the winter. Her online CV says she was a software configuration manager here. That new job was just a 2-minute drive from the location raided by police and soldiers Monday. Global News has confirmed it was Ferrier's apartment. She was 2 months into a 1-year lease. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
We are watching this tonight. Hurricane Teddy churning across the North Atlantic, heading for Nova Scotia. It's still a Category 2 hurricane, but it's expected to lessen to a post-tropical storm when it makes landfall tomorrow. That is still bad, though. Strong winds are expected to whip up huge waves. Swells of up to 10 meters could bring significant flooding to coastal areas. Near Halifax tonight, people living in high-risk regions along the shoreline are being asked to evacuate immediately. Our Ross Lord is further to the east in Port Hastings on Cape Breton Island. Ross.
Well, Donna, this wind and rain is just an early taste of what's coming as Teddy bears down on Atlantic Canada. Mark Dacey just arrived in Cape Breton on a sailing trip with his wife and their son. Despite emerging from quarantine, they're in no position to cut loose. In fact, they're doubling down on their rope lines.
We've also tied around the dock, the lines around the dock rather than on the cleats, because there is a strong chance in these conditions that the cleats will rip out.
The Canadian Hurricane Centre placed the entire south coast of Nova Scotia under a tropical storm warning. Emergency planners say losing hurricane status doesn't make Teddy harmless.
I know people are attracted to the shoreline. They love to watch the waves. I just want to caution folks, please stay back.
Back at the yacht club, they're worried about what will happen when winds shift on Wednesday during the expected height of the storm.
And if we get that southwest wind at a high tide with a surge, we could experience some difficulties, and the parking lot here will likely be underwater.
We're going to be in the top floor of their building in sleeping bags because it's not safe to be on a boat in this kind of weather.
By way of context, Hurricane Juan in 2003 did $200 million worth of damage and is blamed for 4 deaths. Hurricane Dorian last year also left a trail of devastation. Forecasters say Teddy is no Juan and no Dorian, but it could still be dangerous. Donna?
Ross Lord on Cape Breton Island tonight. Thanks. We are going to keep tracking Teddy's path. A little later, our chief meteorologist tells us where exactly it is and when it will hit. Britain's Prime Minister addressed the nation tonight, warning of a long winter ahead. Boris Johnson is reimposing tough public health restrictions because COVID-19 is spreading again. There were almost 5,000 new positive tests in 24 hours there, the highest daily numbers since early May. Johnson, who himself had COVID and ended up in intensive care, chastised young people who don't seem to care, saying, "Your mild cough can be someone else's death knell." Crystal Goomansingh reports.
We must take action now because a stitch in time saves 9. And this way, we can keep people in work, we can keep our shops and our schools open, and we can keep our country moving forward.
A plea from the British Prime Minister as tough new restrictions come into effect. In pubs, for example, there's no more standing. Only table service is permitted, and only until 10.
We're keen to reduce the amount of hours pubs, bars and restaurants can be opened because that leads to, unfortunately, greater socialisation and the virus spreading as well.
Servers must now wear masks along with taxi drivers and retail workers. The tough new measures could stay in place until spring. That's something the head of UK hospitality says could lead to more job losses.
We just reached that tipping point where we might be able to stand on our own 2 feet, and this will knock us right back to where we were in July because of the negative impact on consumer confidence.
And fines are rising for those who don't comply. The military is on standby to ensure officers aren't spread too thin as they focus on enforcement. Anyone who can do their job from home is being told not to go into the office. Johnson says there is no alternative and isn't ruling out more restrictions. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Carbon tax in the Supreme Court ahead. The highest court hears arguments about Canada's climate plan. A fight over the federal carbon tax is now in front of Canada's highest court. Appeals from 3 provinces are being heard. Alberta, Saskatchewan and Ontario argue the tax is unconstitutional. As Eric Sorensen reports, the case could have implications far beyond the issue of climate change.
It has been a tumultuous political and legal path to the Supreme Court. At stake, provincial versus federal powers. The policy, climate change, one of the great issues of our time.
The time is now to take real action.
5 years ago, the Trudeau government promised, then implemented national pollution pricing to reduce greenhouse gases. But as more conservative premiers came to power, the politics grew contentious.
We will beat the carbon tax. I can assure you of this.
And the legal battles began. 3 provincial challenges and a split decision. The courts of appeal in Saskatchewan and Ontario sided with Ottawa's contention that carbon emissions do not respect provincial boundaries and require a national response. Alberta's High Court concluded the federal law encroaches on provincial powers over natural resources. And now 9 Supreme Court justices have returned to the courtroom for the first time since the pandemic began to hear historic arguments over the division of powers in this country.
This is a reference that will shape the Federation for a generation.
Provincial lawyers suggested the law gives Ottawa coercive powers over the provinces and not just on climate change.
There's a risk of provincial non-cooperation. There's no doubt that the provinces acting collectively can regulate every activity within their borders.
Some justices pushed back, suggesting the federal law allows provinces to meet standards set out.
But it seems to me they've left
you guys a whole lot of power.
The government of Canada arguing a national standard is needed to fight climate change.
Pricing across the country is an essential tool.
This case is about whether or not Canada can join the rest of the world in taking joint action to tackle climate change.
But provincial jurisdiction is important for justices to consider.
The balance of federalism between federal and provincial governments is always critical to maintaining a healthy federalism in Canada.
The court will hear from environmental groups and other interveners on Wednesday. A ruling may not come for several months. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Next, tracking Teddy as Atlantic Canada braces for a powerful storm. We want to take you back to what's happening in Atlantic Canada as Hurricane Teddy approaches. With me is Global News Chief Meteorologist Anthony Farnell. Anthony, lots of warnings and watches in effect. How big is this storm?
Donna, Teddy is massive. Since early yesterday morning, it has almost doubled in size. The center, right here, still expected to make landfall sometime late Wednesday morning or early afternoon to the east of Halifax. But really, it's the size of this system that matters. Tropical storm force winds extending out upwards of 850 kilometers away. And all of that wind, well, it's setting a lot of water in motion. Already reports of 50 or more foot waves offshore from Nova Scotia. But that wave action, when you combine with the storm surge and high tides tonight and again on Wednesday, that's going to cause most of the problems with Teddy. Of course, there is rain, there's wind to contend with as well, 50 to 75 millimeters, and those wind gusts right along coastal areas that at times could be above 100 kilometers per hour. Thankfully, Teddy is moving quickly, and by late Wednesday night, conditions are going to improve, and then the cleanup begins. Donna?
All right. Anthony Farnell, thanks. That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this beautiful scene from the district of Stewart in northwestern BC near the Alaskan border. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.